Welcome to Pimprenelle. In this podcast series, I invite you to explore a school that has fascinated me since I was 13, Summerhill, located on the eastern coast of England in Leiston. My fascination stems as much from a personal quest as from an intellectual curiosity. I chose to dedicate my final dissertation in social sciences to this school. I had the opportunity to interview 4 former students, aged between 25 and 72. My research question was as follows: what impact can a radically democratic pedagogy, like that of Summerhill, have on students' professional trajectories and social fulfillments after their schooling? My methodology was inductive. It was the participants themselves who defined what they meant by fulfillment, without my imposing predefined criteria. I did not measure success based on income or family status, but rather through their own narratives, personal satisfaction, and values. In this series, my aim is not to idealize Summerhill, but to open a reflection on the limits of 4 educational systems and to examine the diversity of existing pedagogies. Summerhill, I believe, deserves our attention precisely because of its radical nature. But before delving into the inner workings of Summerhill, I believe it is essential to establish a theoretical and reflective framework through which to approach this podcast. This is especially important for those who remain convinced that education must necessarily rely on constraint, or who equate freedom with permissiveness, fearing that the absence of strict authority might produce so-called spoiled children, capricious, narcissistic, or unfit for the real world. This research has taught me quite the opposite. Through my interviews, it seems that the experiences of their former students did not lead to apathy or individualisms, but rather it fostered the capacity to resist a form of normative injections, and more importantly, a fearlessness in listening to themselves. Perhaps we need to reverse the gaze here, for if we believe that children must be forced to act, it may be because we ourselves were once coerced. If we think that beatings build the character, it is likely because we were taught that suffering is a prerequisite to obedience. Childhood is a time of imitation in which we learn primarily through observing and experimenting ourselves. In such a context, it is not domination that educates, it is the model. But the real question is not whether it is possible to create schools that foster critical thinking through autonomy, social justice through freedom, or transformation through democratic ideals. We already know it is possible. The issue is not of feasibility, it is a collective desire. Do we truly want such schools? The broader question of what is the purpose of schooling is not a scientific one. It is never neutral. Education is never neutral. It conveys worldviews, belief systems, ideologies. It brings into tension irreconcilable conceptions of human nature, power, and success. There will always be those who believe that constraint, hierarchy, and domination are the only guarantees of serious learning, often because they were its beneficiaries, or because they are convinced that only violent constraint leads to self-transcendence. But not all constraint is emancipatory. When imposed from the outside, without meaning, without consent, it can become alienating. True discipline, the kind that elevates, is the kind one chooses, understands, and integrates. It is more like self-disciplines, not submission. And contrary to a persistent belief, children are capable of setting their own limits, delaying gratification, and persevering, provided we trust them and do not confuse authority with authoritarianism. I'm not here to present Summerhill as a flawless model, of course, but its very existence on the margins of the system speaks volume about the current state of schooling. The fact that such a school remains so ostracized reveals the hegemony of certain logics and pedagogy in today's educational field, especially in the West. So, throughout this area, as you listen to the singular trajectories, I invite you to hold in mind 3 questions. What kind of school do we want? For what purposes, and for what kind of society? And above all, are ethical and moral values inherently incompatible with social success in a capitalist, competitive, and hierarchical system? In this series, I invite you to hear the atypical but illuminating paths of my 4 participants, because sometimes, to reimagine school, we must first relearn how to listen to what becomes of children when we truly placed our trust in them. Before I delve into the description of Summerhill, I'm just going to mention a little bit the limitations of this research, because this research is based on a limited number of interviews for former students of Summerhill, which necessarily restricts its generalizability. The trajectories explored are rich and meaningful, but they cannot be taken as representative of the full range of possible experiences within the school. Furthermore, the narratives are retrospective and subjective. They are shaped by memory, by retrospective reconstruction, and the participants' current positionalities. But first, what is Summerhill? So Summerhill was founded in 1921 by Alexander Sutherland Neal. Summerhill is built upon a radical premise. Attendance in lessons is not compulsory. Children are required to be present at school, but they are not obliged to attend classes. The school's rules are established each week during democratic meetings where everyone, students, teachers, and staff, votes on the laws that govern the community. If children choose not to go to class, they are free to spend their day playing, exploring, or simply being outside. A striking example was shared by one of my participants, Dave, who did not receive any formal instruction until the age of 15. This kind of educational trajectory perfectly embodies Neil's vision, the founder, and often he was compared to Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Like Rousseau, Neil believed that education should respect the natural rhythm of the child without imposing premature or artificial learning. Both thinkers argue that coercion corrupts curiosity, and that children learn best when they are free to choose what to learn, when, and how. So the first episode is really dedicated to the lived experiences of my 4 participants at Summerhill, presented from a factual perspective. We will explore their individual journeys, daily life at the school, and the distinctive features of this radical educational model. This episode also examines what Summerhill does or does not prepare its students for, highlighting internal critics and areas of improvement based on the voices of those who attended it. My second episode will focus exclusively on the notions of authority and bullying, exploring how a school built on freedom negotiates conflict, power relations, and peer dynamics. Finally, the third episode will present an intersectional analysis of Summerhill. It is a haven for privileged white children or a genuine promise of educational justice. This episode will also explore the roles of parents, as what I see is a crucial factor, parental commitment to the school's philosophy. Indeed, at Summerhill, education often begins with a political and emotional decision made by the adults. So my 4 participants are Boris, Mary, Dave, and Mike. Those are not their real name for purpose of anonymization. So they attended Summerhill at very different times, one of them in the 1960s and the other around 2010. Yet all 4 agrees that the school left a lasting imprint on their personal and professional development. First, Boris, one of my participants, arrived at Summerhill at the age of 12, after fleeing the civil war in Sudan. Before that, he had attended a highly structured British international school. At Summerhill, he spent his first semester not attending any classes, just playing, getting to know others, and adapting to the pace of the school. He said, "The first 6 months I did nothing academic, nothing, and yet I've never learned so much." Today, Boris works for an international NGO and holds a degree in social sciences. For him, Summerhill was a school that taught him to inhabit freedom, not avoid it. What stood out the most, he said, was the power of school democracy. Chairing meetings, speaking in front of peers and staff, participating in collective rulemaking, this shaped his political awareness. He said, "It's a shock to leave Summerhill. You go from a living democracy to a society where your voice doesn't count as much." Mary also fled Sudan with her family and joined Summerhill around the age of 10, after attending a conventional international school. What she discovered at Summerhill was a new way of learning, one built on curiosity rather than constraint. She voluntarily signed up for classes in English and mathematics, but found that what truly shaped her was not academic content. She said, "What struck me the most was being able to chair a meeting at 13 in front of 60 students and teacher. I asked the headmistress to be quiet because she wasn't respecting the speaking order. In a traditional school, that would have been insolence. At Summerhill, it was just this. Now working as a consultant in the humanitarian sector, Mary credits Summerhill with fostering her ability to speak up, to cooperate, and to navigate complexity. This school taught me how to speak, but more importantly, how to listen. Dave attended Summerhill from the age of 5 until 17. For nearly 10 years, he did not attend formal classes. Instead, he spent his time writing scripts, building sets, and shooting short films. He taught himself to read and write through books and online resources. At 15, he decided to take his GCSEs, particularly in English and math, and he succeeded. He said, "I wanted to be a filmmaker since I was 8. The teachers supported me. Some of them even acted in my movies. When I was 15, I said I wanted to take my exams, but they prepared me in 2 years for what others do in 5. Today, Dave is an independent filmmaker working in documentary, music videos, and creative media. He's also a teacher and often reflects on the contrast between traditional schools and his own education. He said that he was never afraid of teachers. At Summerhill, he said, "You spend your whole day with them, eating, talking, debating. That makes human relationships easier. So when I entered traditional institutions, I kept that attitude. I never felt intimidated by a teacher or a boss. I just saw them as people, not power figures." This untroubled relationship with hierarchy, shaped by Summerhill horizontal culture, helped him navigate traditional institutions without fear, but also without arrogance. "It's not that I reject hierarchy, I'm just not afraid of it. I know it doesn't define people's worth," he said. His teaching today reflects the same ethos. Collaborative, respectful, and built on co-constructing knowledge, he refuses to adopt a top-down posture. "I can't ask my student to be curious if I spend my life telling them what to think," he argues. He describes trust as the most precious pedagogical lesson he inherited from Summerhill. Now let's move on Mike. Mike is the eldest of the participants. He attended Summerhill in the 60s. As a dyslexic child, he remembers being supported, not pressured. A moment that especially marked him was when an art teacher took the time to help him with writing. The art teacher told him, "I could see that your writing is not really working for you, is it? I'm going to teach you how to write. Do you want me to teach how to write better?" This informal but very attentive approach proved transformative. Mike went on to study maths and physics at A-levels, earn a degree in electronics from Essex University, and pursue a distinguished career in engineering and robotics, eventually joining the Green Party and becoming active in local politics. Today, he is a therapist. Summerhill is not a permissive school. It's a school that makes you take the responsibility. And sometimes that is way much harder than having a teacher breathing down your neck, he said. What stands out the most, perhaps, is that each of the participants seems to have chosen their profession out of vocation rather than social pressure. They felt permitted to seek what they loved, not bound by a preordained path. The relationship to work is personal, deliberate, embodied. Dave, who developed a passion for cinema at the age of 8, spent years writing scripts, building sets, and making short films, often with the support of teachers. What he remembers most is not a curriculum, but the freedom to build a personal project supported by available and responsive adults. He declares, "When I got to college, I felt like I was such at an advantage. I've been doing this since I was 8 years old. So I just dived right into it when so many people had never had a chance to make films really, because they were too busy with schools and classes." Mary, for her part, learned early on how to speak in public, chair meetings, and challenge adults within a democratic space. She now works in the humanitarian sector and describes how Summerhill cultivated her ability to listen, take responsibility, and engage in dialogue. "This school taught me how to speak, but more importantly, how to listen." Boris, having experienced rigid international schooling prior to Summerhill, recalls the joy of being able to breathe again, to play, to take his time, which led him to search for meaning over status. Now employed at an NGO, he shares, "I'm grateful to Summerhill for giving me the sense that the world is a playground. that it's better to be happy nobody than a neurotic somebody. And when speaking about his peers, he said, a lot of them quit jobs they didn't like to find something else. It's not a school that pushes you to succeed, it's a school that teaches you to seek. Mike, now retired, left engineering to become an emotional therapist. For him, this professional shift reflects a deep conviction. Our society fails to educate children about emotions. He regrets that traditional schooling neglects emotional responsibility, the ability to interpret and regulate one's own internal responses. What we don't do in traditional education is teach kids that their emotions are their own, that nobody can make them angry or sad. I make myself angry or depressed, and I do that by the way I interpret situations. He now formalizes his thinking in his therapeutic work as emotional responsibility, a concept he directly links to his time at Summerhill. He recalls, I did a test. I went up to the school and asked kids about responsibility, and some of them instinctively knew about emotional responsibility. They were never taught it, but the environment had led them to it. What he finds essential is that real freedom, the ability to make choices and assume their consequences, fosters self-awareness. Summerhill, he argues, cultivates a kind of inner sovereignty, not through formal lessons, but through the everyday practice of freedom that does not infringe upon others. Across all of those 4 testimonies, Summerhill never dictates a path. It opens a space for exploration, hesitation, and personal discovery. When a desire emerges, it is taken seriously. None of the participants claim that Summerhill gave them a vocation, only that it left a room for them to find, inhabit, and reshape one. However, as I listened to the stories of Boris, Mary, Dave, and Mike, a recurring question echoed. Does Summerhill truly prepare its students for the real world? Everyone I interviewed acknowledged the challenge of transitioning out of Summerhill, sometimes abrupt, sometimes disorienting. Boris spoke of the shock of moving from a space where student voices held genuine weight to a society where those same voices are filtered and diminished. Mary described the grief of losing a tight-knit community. At Summerhill, she said, you're constantly surrounded, and then suddenly you're not. At Summerhill, you're never alone, and then suddenly you find yourself in environments where no one knows each other, where there's no strong collective framework. Dave admitted that while he chose to sit exams and transition into media studies, this required initiative on his part, something not all students had the tools or awareness to do. He said, nothing prepares you for the logistics. There's no career advisor. If you want to take the GCSEs, you have to decide that yourself. I saw some friends realize it too late. He suggests that Summerhill could do more to bridge freedom and guidance for those wanting to pursue selective or structured academic paths. Mike, echoing the same concern, explained, the teachers helped me write, think, create, but no one ever talked to me about careers or university. I had to find that information elsewhere. He acknowledged that his family background helped him to compensate, but raised a critical question. It's not a problem if you've gotten the informed parents, but if you don't, you could miss out. Several participants pointed to this blind spot in career guidance and external orientation, not as a plea for conformity, but as a call for a more intentional scaffolding between inside and outside worlds. So to conclude, this may be Summerhill's greatest paradox. It does not prepare students to fit the world as it is, it prepares them to question its very foundations. It shapes individuals who can resist normative pressures, chart their own path, and collaborate without submitting, and exist without dominating. And so the central question remains, should education prepare us to adapt to the world as it is or to transform it? I leave you with this tension, which will continue to unfold across the next 2 episodes. To interrogate Summerhill is not merely to reflect on an alternative school. It is to pierce open a space for reimagining what we believe education and society can be. In the next episode, we will turn to a different yet equally vital theme, authority and bullying. This topic surfaced throughout the interviews, not always explicitly but persistently.
We will explore how a school built on freedom negotiates justice, power, and the human tensions that arise when authority is decentralized.